about indentured servitude, basically agreed labor. Like you basically signed yourself up for slavery, or for labor. You basically sign yourself up to work for the person. That's what I hear a lot of people say. Well, this man has something to say to that. So let's play the clip.
Exodus 21 begins to describe the law with regard to Hebrew servants, or actually male Hebrew servants, because women are a completely separate category in the Bible, especially women slaves, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And Leviticus 25 expands the law on slavery to make a clear distinction between Hebrew servants, or your indentured servitude that you'd like to appeal to, and male slaves. But this indentured servitude argument is horrible for two reasons. It's simply a bad apologetic. First of all, it's not true. It is not true that the Bible only advocates for indentured servitude. It does advocate for both indentured servitude and slavery. And the second reason that it's bad is because indentured servitude is probably also immoral. It's not like there's a good system in place to protect these people who are in debt slavery. It's a very problematic system. It is prone to exploitation, and the rules that are in place in the Bible, even if indentured servitude wasn't already a problem, don't make any sense. You want a plot of land? 6 years. Want a cow? Is that 6 years? What if I want 2 cows? Is that 6 years? Is it 12 years? Is it 6 years? I don't understand. There's one thing. If you go and sell yourself into servitude, you serve for 6 years. Shouldn't it matter what you're trying to get out of it?
All right. All right. All right. So the brother says that's not true. It's not just this idea that a lot of you Bible believers say, not everybody, that say, yeah, it's conditional servitude, it's agreed labor. That's the slavery it was talking about, not the Atlantic trades, like what we had here in America. Uh, what do you say to that? Who wants to tackle that question? Black Jesus Minister and Akeem, because you guys kind of brought it up first. So which one of y'all want to go for it?
I take it. I take it. So he came right out the gate and he mentioned Exodus 21, right? Okay, so let's go to Exodus 21 real quick. I'm gonna read Exodus 21:16 real quick. It says, "He that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death." So this whole, he's saying that it's not, it's both. It's in indentured servitude, and um, you willingly putting yourself into servitude to work for whatever the goal is, right? But there is, and he said that there wasn't anything governing it. It is. It's called the Torah. It's called the law, and it was very specific. There's specific instruction throughout the Old Testament about how to deal with your servant, how to deal with certain situations, right? Like if you look at Isaiah chapter 58, that entire chapter outlines what you're supposed to do. If you have somebody that works for you, you're supposed to pay them a fair wage. You're not supposed to treat them badly. You're not supposed to abhor them. You're not supposed to do a lot of different things that he alluded to in the video. So to say, there's to have such an extreme and then make it as if it's the ultimate truth is completely nonsense. Right out the gate from Exodus 21. You know what I mean? You have situations where you have servants and you treat the servants with honor and with respect. Like Brother Zadok mentioned earlier, the word slave was translated from the Greek word that actually meant servant, not slave. And that's not the only way you found only place you find it throughout the scriptures. And that's the problem is people are reading these scriptures at face value, not looking at what the translations are actually talking about, and then forming an opinion and spreading that opinion to, malleable minds, and people pick it up and take it and run with it and try to throw the whole Bible out because of a misunderstanding. Going back to what we said before, ignorance.
All right, all right. Okay, so Black Jesus Minister, you want to tackle that?
I do, but I would like to hear from the sister. She hasn't spoken yet on the past two topics.
All right, Reese Roberts, go ahead. I was gonna let you two go because you brought it up. Then I was gonna go to Reese and Zadok. But if you want to pass your turn up to Reese, go ahead, Reese.
No, I'll defer to the sister and then come on back to me.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, I'm not sure what the question actually is on the floor, though. I mean, I heard the assertion about indentured servitude,
I'll
but
explain. Okay, so the
So the
question,
question,
so this is
so
what the
this is
guy
what
is
the guy is
saying.
saying.
The guy
The
is
guy is
saying
saying
that
that
Bible
Bible
believers
believers
teach
teach
that
that
slavery in the
slavery in the
scriptures
scriptures
was
was
agreed
agreed
labor.
labor.
And he's
And
saying
he's
that's
saying
not
that's
true.
not true.
And then on
And then
top
on
of that,
top
he's
of that,
saying
he's
even
saying
if it
even if it
was,
was,
when
is
is
being
being a
a
slave ever
slave ever
okay,
okay,
even if you
even if
agree
you
to it?
agree to it?
Therefore, the Bible teaches
Bible teaches
slavery,
slavery,
therefore,
therefore
put it
Mute
away.
your mic, sister, so you won't have a reverb. Mute your mic.
I'm not sure why there's a reverb. Um, I'm just talking through my regular speaker. There's a there's an echo.
Yeah, there was. I
Was
maybe
I
you
maybe
didn't hear it,
didn't hear it,
but
but
if you
if
don't
you
hear it,
don't
then
hear
that's
it, then
fine.
that's fine.
Okay, I didn't hear echo.
It's
But
echoing when
When
multiple people
multiple
are
people
on, it
are
looks
on, it
like.
looks like.
So as
So
soon as
as soon as
everyone finishes
everyone finishes
talking,
talking,
mute your
mute
mic
your
and
mic
then
and
put
then
your mic
put your
back
mic
on.
back on.
So I'm gonna
So
turn
I'm gonna
mine
turn
off,
mine
the
off. The
echo will
echo
go.
will.
okay. So I guess the overall sentiment about indentured servitude is if it's right or wrong, and I think that my previous point still is relevant to this question is that the circumstances under which a person lives their life is going to determine whether or not they are rightfully in servitude or not. If a person does not invest in their life to become to put themselves in a position where they do not need to be in service, but they need to be, well, I should say they don't need to be a servant, but they need to be in service. There's, to me, a difference. A person in power is a person who is in service. A master should be a person who is in service. But to be a servant means that you are literally the one providing service under some sort of instruction or some sort of provisional plan for the service that you contribute. But I think that is a natural order of operations on the planet. Even ants have a social society structure of hierarchy where certain people get assigned certain jobs, duties, tasks, depending on their ability, their position, and so on and so forth. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with society taking the natural order that it is going to take in order for that society to build and sustain itself. The only thing I think is out of order, out of line, is when we start talking about malicious intent. And that's, to me, the determining factor is that if there is a situation where a person is being forced into servitude or being forced to agree to serve them, to commit themselves to work for their provisions, that type of stuff to me is where we start to split the hair. And we have to say, no, this is not right. This is not what I think the Bible may have intended when it talks about masters and slaves. And that should be across the board. I mean, because an employee is a slave to it.
Oh, we just lost her. She just dropped. Okay, she'll probably come right back. So Black Jesus Minister.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you remember the question that was on the
Yeah, I
floor.
do.
She'll
I
come back.
do.
When we come back, we'll give her 30 more seconds to wrap it up.
All right. Well, that guy is another example of extreme nonsensical bias.
You
Extreme.
recognize him?
No. I don't
Oh,
recognize him. I'm just giving you my opinion of the guy, and it's very typical. Another example of extreme hatred, nonsensical bias to sit up here and lay indentured servitude only at the feet of the Bible. Slavery and indentured servitude was practiced all over the world in every culture on the planet, man. Ladies and gentlemen, why are we so gung ho to try to sit up here and castigate the Bible and the people of the Bible when you need to castigate whatever culture you came from? You're not going to do that, but you want to castigate the Bible, though, don't you? Because you're nonsensical, you're biased, you have been brainwashed with Bible hate. You are absolutely simple in your understanding and in your study. You haven't studied nothing. All right. Now, the guy said, well, and even, indentured servitude was wicked. What the hell? What kind of stupidity is that? And some of y'all believe that madness because you hate the Bible just like he do. You hate it so much that you can't even think. You can't even think straight. Okay? And he can't think straight. Indentured servitude is voluntary. Okay? It's voluntary. Stop it. And yes, when people want something, if they wanted land, if they wanted a cow, even if they wanted a wife, people of all cultures, including the people in the Bible, would work for the father of that woman, just as Moses did with Jethro, to get that wife, to get that land, to get anything of value if they don't have the money for it. So again, he's just another example of this extreme stupidity and shameless stupidity. Okay. And ignorant people think that these people are saying something. Extremely ignorant people like you were clapping while that ignorant man was shamelessly boasting in his ignorance. Okay. Brothers and sisters, many of you all need to realize that you are ignorant. You don't know nothing about the Bible. You don't know nothing about the culture. You don't know nothing about history. And it's time for you all to elevate yourselves and stop all this extreme hatred and bias toward the Bible and its culture, which is not unique, but is shared among all the cultures of the world. Thank you.
All right, Reese, I'm gonna let you back up because you had 30 more seconds to finish what you were trying to say about what the brother was saying. What the
Oh,
man was
yes.
saying.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how I got cut off, but there's like I said, I believe that there is a necessity for understanding when it comes to these labels that we're putting on because they do have real world modern implications, especially like I was saying, an employee is legally considered to be a slave, and that's the legal definition of an employee. So, we have to start removing you know how what's the word I'm looking for, conditioned understandings or indoctrinated understandings of these words, because if you're an employee and you got somebody basically paying you for your livelihood and you can't stop working there or else you won't be able to eat, how is that any different from an indentured servant or an indentured slave? It is absolutely no different. And
Mm,
it's actually even worse in our society because there's no time limit on it. The time limit is death.
yeah, you work till you pass out.
You work
Zadok.
until you work until you drop.
Yeah, pretty much. Till they say you retire, you ain't got no life left for you anyway.
Exactly. You at that point you lay it up somewhere.
Pretty much. Zadok, you've been quiet for a little bit. Did you hear what the man said? He said that there's two kind of slaveries in the Bible. It wasn't just this whole you signed up for slavery, and even if you did, it's still immoral. What do you have to say to that? Zadok, are you in the building? Okay, I guess he's not there. So let's go ahead. Oh, yeah, he's gone. So let's go ahead to the next thing. So you guys are sitting here saying, and I'm glad that you guys said that because he brings up another point. So what I'm hearing is I'm hearing Reese, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, let me know. But what I'm getting is Black Jesus Minister saying they ignorant, they don't even know what they're talking about, they don't even read the Bible, he just spewing foolishness. And Akeem is saying, no, if you steal a man and try to make him a slave, that was wrong. So is no one out there just kidnapping people. And then Reese says, we all slaves. The heck you talking about? We got to work for the man. We a slave. We all slaves. We got
Can
Zadok
you
back.
hear me?
Zadok, yeah, what you got to say about what
Okay.
we're talking about?
Um, I'm glad Reese brought up the actual legal definition of employee. It'll do people some good to read because the guy who was on, who that clip was on, if he's an employee, he's legally a slave under a binding contract, and if he's an employer, he's literally a master who has slaves legally under legal binding contracts. And if you actually go and read black law, then you can actually find some of these terms even more defined because of the legal parameters for the sake of writing contracts. But without me parroting everything these brethren said, I'll say this. I think that the cultural and ancient Near Eastern narrative has to be put into play. That's why Black Jesus said all nations had their practice of some sort of what today we would call slavery or some kind of indentured servitude. You know what's interesting in the Bible? What's interesting is what people got to remember is when the children of Israel had been given their land, they were the only ones given in a land inheritance. And in a 100% agrarian society that was not empire, but it was an agrarian society where every family in the nation had guaranteed land to pass on as generational wealth. When people who by God's providence had the right to come and live in your country, they didn't get a land inheritance. So many people, the scripture would say, they will, when they sell themselves to you. And what does that mean? I sell myself to someone when I sign a contract and say, yeah, pay me $25, $27 an hour, and I'll be at your place 50 hours a week. At this time, you say, I will work these mandatory weekends. I will take my vacation at this time you allow, all of that. And so there were different forms of it. But what they're leaving out is the fact that this was a society-wide thing because you had many people who were poor and had nothing. And the scripture even tell you, if the stranger among you sells you their own son and their own daughter, you can have them as lifelong servants. But a Hebrew by law, you had to let go after 7 years. He said, and if you had a Hebrew male who was a servant for 7 years and you let him go and you gave him a wife, if he says to you, no, I love my master and my wife and my children, I'm not going anywhere. He said, then you shall enter into another contract with him. And even by the Hebrews' own choice, he could become your servant for life. So it might be strange to us because we don't live in that societal narrative from 3 millennia ago. But don't make it seem as if there was maliciousness and evil involved. It was their way of governing the society. And they were told not to treat the strangers who will become their servants. Don't oppress them because you remember what it is to be a stranger when you were in Egypt. That should say it all.
Well, yeah, it says quite a bit. Now, I'm glad all of you again said all that because he gives a response to this idea that what everyone is saying, that, hey, look, it was a setup system. Wasn't just the Bible. This was something everyone did. It was all over the place. But he says he shows in the scriptures where this stuff was evil, it was bad, it was wrong, and no one should be picking this book up, teaching this to anybody or believing it. Because of these scriptures that he's going to go through.
Exodus 21, verses 20 and 21. This is from the New King James. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. In verses 23 through 25, the Bible sets up the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth law. But in the 2 verses that follow it, there's an exception to the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth law, and that's for slaves. If you put out the eye of a slave or knock out the tooth of a slave, you don't lose your eye or tooth. You just have to let the slave go free. In verses 28 and 29, there's a passage about if your bull has a habit of goring people and you don't keep it pinned up and it runs rampant and gores somebody and kills them, the bull is stoned to death and you are killed because you're negligent. But if that bull goes and kills a slave, well, the bull still has to die, but the owner of the bull is not killed. He just has to pay 30 shekels.
All right. Did you guys get it? Because it was
Yeah.
skipping on my end. But,
Yeah. We
heard
heard it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's his take proving that the Bible did treat slaves horribly, that they were mistreating them, and that no one should be picking up this book and teaching it to anybody because of that.
Well, he's filed for the way he's viewing it, because it's not that the Bible is telling you to beat a slave. It's not telling you to do that. It's telling you what will happen if you do that. The same way it says what would happen to a man if he slept with a man's wife. Is it promoting men to sleep with men's wives, or is it giving you the penalty of what should happen according to law if you did it. So first of all, the if is conditional, correct? Is if conditional? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as far as being the property, yes, that's what I was just referring to. Remember, I said there were different levels of servitude, and the strangers among you, because they had no right to land, they had no right to own the land in their society. Some people can have issue with that, but that's what it was. What many of them would do is they would sell themselves to you, and that's the way their families would be able to come up and be able to live from generation to generation, because they couldn't buy land because Israelites owned every piece of land. So now look at what it says. If you hit your servant, if you hit them and your servant lost an eye or lost a tooth, you know what he did? He made eye for eye and tooth for tooth be literal. That is not what the law means. It's just meaning something has to be done in order to rectify what you did. So if you had a servant who was valuable to you, they're worth money because they produce for you, and because you harmed them to the point that they lost a tooth, that man lost a tooth, oh no, you got to let him go free. And guess what? You lost the value of having a lifelong servant. No, that man free now. So that is what you lost. You actually lost the person who belonged to you by law. They would take that person from you and say, no, you got to let him or her go free. The other one that he said, he conflated two laws. You had a law about if a bull had gored someone and was known in time past to have harmed someone, then you were supposed to and you never kept the animal locked up and they wind up killing somebody, then that would happen to you. Then the bull would be put to death and the owner, because the owner knew the animal was dangerous. It says, but if the animal harmed someone who was property of another, then you weren't put to death, even though the animal still was put to death, but you still had to give the owner of the deceased servant whatever they demanded by law, because they lost property like you lost property. So that's where he's not explaining it fully. And once again, what we shouldn't do is hold a Bedouin society of 3,000 years ago to what we live by now. That you just should not do that, because there are still things that you would find like kind of what's the right word? You would find it kind of irritating, because that's not even something you do. Like most women would have a problem with their father being able to take off of them a promise they made to God. But in the Bible, that's the authority a father had. There's women who got problems with that. Okay, cool, I understand. But let's not try to make them less than because that's weird to you.
All right, Akeem, you ain't speaking a while, then we'll go to Black Jesus Minister.
Absolutely, Brother Zadok made a great point, and that's exactly where I wanted to go with it. I'll just expound a little bit more. Like in regards to the bull, like he said, you had to pay recompense, whatever the owner required from you, right? But it was in regards to the eye for an eye. If you look into the law, it says that an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. But that was in a Hebraic court of law. It was not, you punch me in the face and I get to punch you back. That's why when the Messiah said, you heard it was said that it was eye for an eye. But I say that if he strike you, you turn the other cheek to him to be struck on the other side. And people say that's a contradiction. It's not a contradiction. The Messiah was expounding upon the law in regards to what would happen and how you had to conduct yourself, because it was what was going on in the court of law. So all of those things were judicial proceedings. So if you run into that issue where the man in the video was misquoting, he didn't mention anything about there being a judicial proceeding. So in that type of situation, it was a judicial proceeding. There had to be 2 or more witnesses to even provide any of this. And then, like Brother Zadok mentioned, the Easternized Hebraic culture and the laws that governed during the time is different from now. Like when I was first starting to read the Bible and I read about how the Israelites was told to go into a certain area and kill everybody, women and children, it didn't sit right with me, because I viewed from my modern day viewpoint that women and children are innocent, so they shouldn't be harmed, right? They should be protected. But when you look at the bigger picture for the preservation of the chosen people of the book, that those other individuals, what they were doing, corrupting themselves, would cause Israel to be corrupted, which we saw throughout the entire Old Testament, which brought on various captivities and servitudes, right? That is a clear, example of why you can't put 2023 modern laws and understanding in society and try to hold the Bible to that standard, because it'll never add up.
All right, Bishop, I see you in the comment section. You lighting it up. So in about 10, 20 more minutes, we're going to give you an opportunity to come up here. So I'm going to put the link in the chat. In about 20 minutes, I'm going to start bringing the audience up to ask any of the people on the floor, Zadok, Reese, Akeem, Black Jesus Minister, ask them any question that you'd like regarding the topic on the floor. So Black Jesus Minister, what do you have to say about the scriptures that the man brought out, breaking down that you didn't have to die, an eye for an eye if you was a slave, or a tooth for a tooth if you were a slave?
Yeah, these biblical regulations were to prevent the abuse of slaves and to execute consequences upon those who abuse their slaves. And be honest now, what slavery culture, and you can compare the American slavery, in what slave culture outside of Israel, wherein you harmed your slave, you knocked out a tooth, you knocked out their eye, or you killed them, or well, let's say not killed them, but you harmed them in a very extreme way, and they were given their freedom. What other culture did that happen? It may only be unique among Israel. That didn't happen. I never heard of that happening anywhere else. So evidently, I would have to conclude that the slavery that was exercised by Israel was perhaps the least harmful slavery because they had rights. They had rights, and slaves in other cultures had no rights. I'm going to have to give some pushback to everyone who has said that, slavery and being an employee is the same thing. Saying slavery and it being an employee is the same thing, brothers and sisters, because if that's the case, then if Black people are asking for reparations, as we are, some of us who are back in the reparations movement, well, then if you actually believe that, then white people who were employees should also be asking for reparations. Brothers and sisters, there is a clear difference between being a slave and versus an indentured servant or an employee. And I know culturally and vernacularly, we love to say, "Oh, I'm going to the plantation, my job. I'm going back to the plantation. I'm going back to my slave job." We love to say that, and we've been saying it there so long that we actually believe it. Brothers and sisters, involuntary servitude in employment not involuntary, voluntary servitude. All right, and being an employee is voluntary. You can quit and leave whenever you want. A slave is somebody's property. You don't get compensated. You don't get paid. How can you compare yourself to a slave when you get a paycheck and you're able to go home and purchase a house, pay your house note, have a car, feed your children? It is an insult to say that we are slaves and to compare our condition with our enslaved foremothers and forefathers who prayed and sacrificed and died for us to be in the same position as white people today who get paid on a job.
Is it okay if I respond real quick?
Yes, ma'am. You were next anyway, so go ahead, girl. Do your thing. You did perfect. It was perfect timing. You and Black Jesus Minister seem to be linked today. Like y'all just got this flow going right now. Go ahead, girl.
I receive that. But the thing I want to say about this is on a macro scale of measurement. Us being able to volunteer, saying that it's voluntary that we are employees is a bit of a stretch, because if you quit your job and don't go get another one, you're not going to make it. unless you have some sort of something bringing money in to sustain your life. And in the contracting world, which I write contracts for a living, I write a lot of technical legal information. And in contract terms, what you would call that is duress. Is yes, I may have agreed to do this, but had I had my own free will to create my own ideal situation, I would not have. And so to say, well, me being an employee, I'm volunteering to come and get this job. Society I don't think we would agree with that, saying that it's voluntary because 90% of the people that I know don't ever like their job or want to go there. They're not, if they could not volunteer and still be able to eat and feed their children and do all the things, that would be their choice first. But another point I want to make before I yield is that we are, yes, being employed and paid to make money and do this, that, and the third, but are you really getting paid if you're living paycheck to paycheck? Are you really getting paid anything if you're not carrying any of that money from last week into next week or last month into next month to where you have any sustainability outside of your master? Because if your master cuts you off and lets you go without giving you that week to week or month to month substance, then you are literally, in a a panic mode of needing something, or what they call survival mode. And so to me, that is not what I think a person in their right mind would say that they volunteered for. No, I actually came into this body, into this being on this planet to be free, to be abundant, to be a thinker, to be a doer, for me to be and exist, not for me to go and find somebody to tell me how to use my energy, tell me how to use my power. Okay, because you were born on this plot of land in this area of the world, you work for me now. And you're going to go to work in my corporations, and you're going to serve my mission. That's not something I believe any person voluntarily came to this planet for. And I yield.
Woo. Okay.